Hey everybody, it is Chris, and we are looking at the new Player's Handbook. And I've been going through all the classes, and in these videos, I show you all the features up on the screen, word for word, for what you would see in the new Player's Handbook. This way, hopefully, that by September 17th, you'll have seen almost all of the Player's Handbook, word for word, so that you'll know exactly what's in it, so you can make your decision for yourself, whether it's something you're interested in purchasing or not. So one thing that I do want to show you right now as well is if you look at my subscriber count, I'm really close to 100,000. This is my goal. So if you are watching this video and you are not subscribed, please subscribe, because if I get to 100,000, that would mean a lot to me. Every subscription counts. I'd really appreciate it. So we're going to be starting out with spellcasting. Now, I am going to be going over some iconic spells that the Cleric has later in this video, but in terms of spellcasting in general, it's for the most part going to feel pretty much the same as what we've had up to now. One thing that will change is the number of spells you prepare used to be based on your level plus your wisdom modifier, and now it is a set amount on the Cleric class chart, but the progression is going to be very similar to as if you were playing with the old rules. You won't really feel a difference there. Another thing that has kind of updated from the 2014 Player's Handbook is that when you gain a level, you can change out a cantrip. Now, you could do this after Tasha's, but that has been ported over to the 2024 Player's Handbook. Didn't appear in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Otherwise, it's basically the same. So you finish a long rest, you can change out your spells, you can pick any spell that's on this Cleric spell list. You don't have to have it in this spell book or anything like that. Your spells are based on your wisdom, or your spell DCs and spell attack rolls are. And so for the most part, this is going to seem very much what you're used to. All right, so that is spellcasting. So in addition to spellcasting, at level 1, we are also going to get Divine Order. And this kind of replaces what subclasses often got at level 1. Often at level 1, they would get training in heavy armor or training in martial weapons, or both. Some did, some didn't. Now it's going to kind of all be the same, where everyone's going to get something at level 1. So it says you have dedicated yourself to one of the following sacred roles of your choice. Protector, trained for battle, you gain proficiency with martial weapons and training with heavy armor. So some subclasses give you this at level 1. Now, regardless of your subclass, if this is what you want at level 1, you can select it. Now, if I was a strength-based cleric, then I might want heavy armor. Otherwise, clerics already have medium armor and shields. And if I am a dexterity-based cleric, like generally speaking, you can have a secondary ability score that you're interested in having at least decent, and it'll be either dexterity or strength. If it's dexterity, then you probably want the medium armor anyways. And then martial weapons. Martial weapons are that much better than simple weapons. So if you're going to be using a weapon, you might want martial weapons, but it's not a big deal, even if you are using weapons. And a lot of clerics don't use weapons at all. And then the other option is Thaumaturge. One extra cantrip from the Cleric's spell list. In addition, your mystical connection to the divine gives you a bonus to your intelligence, arcana, or religion checks. The bonus equals your wisdom modifier. And this is just one of those little funny things about Dungeons & Dragons, is that, when it comes to knowing things about religion, you would assume the Cleric's going to be the best at it. But under the old rules, they weren't. The best at it were the wizards, because wizards have intelligence, and religion checks generally are based on intelligence, and clerics just can't afford a good intelligence. So now, by adding your wisdom modifier, you can actually have the cleric be one of the best at religion, finally. And arcana makes sense for clerics as well, because they are magical. So the thaumaturge option is brand new. There was no such option in the old rules, but protector, it depended on your subclass. You might have gotten something like that, and now you get to customize, which is nice. Either way, these are fairly minor features. This is almost a ribbon. Okay, so let's move on to level 2. Then Channel Divinity at level 2. The old cleric also got Channel Divinity at level 2. This is what they use to turn undead with. They also usually get a subclass use of Channel Divinity, at least one use. Some even had multiple uses for Channel Divinity. And now with Channel Divinity, there's really two main differences. The first difference is that instead of starting with one use and capping out at 3, you're going to cap out at, or you're going to start out with 2 uses and cap out at 4, but you only get 1 back on a short rest, all back on a long rest. You used to get them all back on a short rest. Second major change is Divine Spark. So this is a new option for Channel Divinity. As a magic action, you point your holy symbol at another creature you can see within 30 feet of yourself and focus divine energy at it. You roll a d8 and add your wisdom modifier. You either restore hit points to that creature equal to that total, or you force the creature to make a constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes necrotic or radiant damage, which is your choice, equal to that total, and on a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage. So, d8 plus wisdom modifier, save for half. You roll an additional d8 when you reach cleric level 7, 13, and 18. Kind of a strange progression there. Usually we're used to seeing 5, 11, 17. But anyways, it is essentially going to progress the same number of times that things like your cantrips do. So that's Divine Spark. So it's going to give you just another way to use your Channel Divinity. And one thing about Channel Divinity is, depending on the subclass you play, it may not come up in every session, right? Because Turn Undead, of course, only works on Undead. Not every adventure has Undead. And then, depending what your subclass use is, that might not come up either. Divine Spark should always come up. There's always somebody that you can heal or somebody that you can damage, and this gives you both options, and it's okay. Not a bad feature at all. And Turn Undead has also changed a little bit. So the old version, the undead that saw your holy symbol had to make a saving throw, wisdom saving throw against your spell DC, and if they failed, then they were frightened, and on their turn, they had to take their action to dash away from you. Now it says, as a magic action, you present your holy symbol and sense your undead creatures. Each undead of your choice within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If the creature fails its save, it has the frightened and incapacitated conditions for 1 minute. So incapacitated says that it can't take action. So it can't take the dash action away from you. For that duration, it tries to move as far from you as it can on its turns, because incapacitated doesn't affect its movement. So it can use its regular movement to move away from you, but it cannot dash anymore. This effect ends early on the creature if it takes any damage, if you have the incapacitated condition, or you die. So overall, I'd say Turn Undead is probably better, because those undead, you don't necessarily want them dashing away from you, because they will dash away from you and, you know, get behind cover. You can't affect them anymore, and then eventually the effect is going to wear off, and they're going to come back. And now you have the ability that you could potentially finish them off one at a time while they're trying to flee at their normal movement rate. I guess it, to some degree, depends on your situation, but overall I'd say this is a better feature now. At level 3, we're going to choose our subclass for Cleric. This used to be gained at level 1, so it's now gained at level 3, and it says that you can choose the Life Domain, the Light Domain, the Trickery Domain, or the War Domain. Those are the domains that appear in the 2024 Player's Handbook, and they are all revisions from the 2014 versions. And a little conversion note here, it says, with the last sentence, for the rest of your career, you gain each of your subclasses features that are of your cleric level or lower. So in other words, if you pick one of the non-revised subclasses, any feature you would have gotten at level 1 or 2, you're going to have access to right away. At level 4, we'll get our first ability score improvement, and clerics get them at all the standard levels. This has not changed at all. At level 5, we're going to get a new feature, Seer Undead. The old feature that it replaces was Destroy Undead, which said that if you did your Turn Undead and the undead creature was of a certain challenge rating, it could just be destroyed instead of actually being turned. Well, now it says whenever you use Turn Undead, you can roll a number of d8s equal to your Wisdom modifier, and you add the rolls together. Each undead that fails its saving throw against that use of Turn Undead takes radiant damage equal to the roll's total. this damage doesn't end the turn effect. So you still might destroy undead with Seer Undead if your damage is high enough and their hit points are low enough. But the nice thing here is if they are above those challenge ratings that you previously would have destroyed, you're doing some damage to them that doesn't end the turn effect. So when you do deal with those undead, they'll have less hit points to deal with. At level 7, we will get Blessed Strikes, and this replaces, in Tasha's, we got a Blessed Strikes feature at level 8. This will replace that. And if you are using the 2014 Player's Handbook, every subclass at level 8 got a feature where they either did extra damage with a weapon or they did extra damage with a cantrip. Blessed Strikes will replace that feature. It says, Divine Power infuses you in battle. You gain one of the following options of your choice. If you get either option from a Cleric subclass in an older book, use only the option you chose for this feature. Divine Strike. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll using a weapon, you can cause that target to take an extra 1d8 necrotic or radiant damage, your choice. And in the old subclasses, there was always a certain damage type that you added with Divine Strike. I think with the War Domain, it was actually the weapons damage type, and then for all the other domains, it was something else. Now it's going to be necrotic or radiant, and you will choose. And then Potent Spellcasting, add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any Cleric cantrip. So you're going to choose whether you want to add to your weapon damage or your cantrip damage. And for most Clerics that I see in play, they'll probably choose cantrip damage. At level 10, we are going to get our first really major change, and that is to Divine Intervention. So here's the old version up on your screen. Excuse all the white. Beginning at 10th level, you can call on your deity to intervene on your behalf when your need is great. Imploring your deity's aid requires you use your action. You describe the assistance you seek, then you roll percentile dice. If you roll a number equal or lower than your cleric level, then your deity intervenes. That meant at 10th level, you had a 10% chance of it working. The DM chooses the nature of the intervention. The effect of any cleric spell or cleric domain spell would be appropriate. If your deity intervenes, you can't use this feature again for 7 days. Otherwise, you can use it after you finish a long rest. All right? So that's the old Divine Intervention. Here's the new one. You can call on your deity or pantheon to intervene on your behalf. As a magic action, you choose any cleric spell of 5th level or lower that doesn't require a reaction to cast. As part of the same action, you cast that spell without expending a spell slot or needing material components. You can't use this feature again until you finish a long rest. So, first thing, it automatically works. Second thing, you don't have to wait 7 days before you use it again. You can use it after every long rest. At third thing, you're choosing the exact effect that occurs. And the final thing is there is a limitation placed on it. You can't choose anything but a cleric spell of 5th level or lower that doesn't use a reaction. And that's pretty much every cleric spell of 5th level or lower. And that does include spells that take longer to cast. I think the most obvious use of this is for something like Raise Dead. Raise Dead takes an hour to cast, has a costly component, so you could use Divine Intervention and cast Raise Dead with one action, no component. So I think that's really iconic. If we're talking about terms of power, the most powerful option, and we already went through this with the playtest, is almost certainly the Hollow spell, which has not really changed at all from the 2014 version. And the Hollow spell affects a big area and has a list of things that it does. Too big for me to go through, but you can make all your enemies vulnerable to whatever damage type you like. You can restrict them from the area, and many, many more things. So it's just insanely powerful. Far more powerful than you should be able to get with a 10th level feature. You can maybe duplicate the effects of a Hollow spell with something like Wish. Otherwise, it just isn't something you would have been able to do. Certainly not at level 10 in the old rules. So I think that's something that the designers must have just missed or didn't care about. not sure which, but that one spell, Hollow, is potentially a power level problem, and it is something that if you are going to have a cleric that's going to be reaching level 10, you probably want to have a discussion with your table about, because it will be something that your cleric can do that is just far more powerful than any 10th level character in the game can do at that level. So something to consider. One of the many things with the 2024 rules that you're going to want to talk to your table about and see how they want to handle it. At level 14, we're going to get a brand new feature, Improved Blessed Strikes. The option you chose for Blessed Strikes grows more powerful. Divine Strike, the extra damage of your Divine Strike increases to 2d8. And Potent Spell Casting, when you cast a Cleric cantrip and deal damage to a creature with it, you can give Vitality to yourself or another creature within 60 feet of yourself, granting a number of temporary hit points equal to twice your Wisdom modifier. So the improvement to Divine Strike, going to 2d8, scaling was already built into the similar features that were in the old Player's Handbook, but Potent Spellcasting, the old feature that improves your ability to do damage with cantrips, never improved. So this is a brand new thing. So there is, I should mention, a bag of rats issue with this. And a bag of rats issue is when you're talking to somebody in the optimization community, is a feature where, if you were to be holding a big bag of live rats and, you were to use a feature on a rat, do you get a benefit from it? And Potent Spellcasting is one of those features. If you were to just do attack cantrips on your rats, you could give you and your party all temporary hit points. So that's a bag of rats problem. And this has that kind of loophole. Whether you choose to exploit that loophole should be, a matter of how you and your table run your game. Okay, if you guys like doing stuff like that, then there's nothing wrong with it. And if, your DM is not into bag of rats kind of exploits of features, then you shouldn't. But the opportunity is there. Just going to point that out. At level 19, we're going to get an epic boon. This is just an ability score increase. They're letting you know that you can select an epic boon at level 19. And as soon as you're level 19, if you get a feat, you should select an epic boon. They're just better than all the other feats. Okay? And then at level 20, we get Greater Divine Intervention. The old version basically said, let me just bring it up on screen. At 20th level, your call for intervention succeeds automatically, no roll required. So this was your level 10 Divine Intervention feature. Instead of rolling percentile dice and seeing if it worked, it automatically worked. And just as with Divine Intervention, then you couldn't use it again for 7 days. The new version, you can call on even more powerful Divine Intervention. When you use your Divine Intervention feature, you can choose Wish when you select a spell. If you do so, you can't use Divine Intervention again until you finish 2d4 long rests. So now it's a random number of long rests if you choose Wish with your Divine Intervention feature. And Wish allows you to do all kinds of different stuff, just like the old Divine Intervention did. You're going to let your DM know the kind of effect you're looking for, and then that just happens. If it's duplicating a spell of 8th level or lower, then that just happens. Now, presumably, this doesn't avoid the possibility of getting stress with Wish. The Wish spell, I'll just bring it up. It says, the stress of casting Wish to produce any effect other than duplicating another spell weakens you. After enduring that stress, each time you cast a spell until you finish a long rest, you take a d10 necrotic damage per level of that spell. This damage can be reduced or prevented in any way. In addition, your strength score becomes 3 for 2d4 days. For each of those days that you spend resting and doing nothing more than light activity, your remaining recovery time decreases by 2 days. Finally, there's a 33% chance that you are unable to cast Wish ever again if you suffer this stress. Nothing in the feature suggests that we avoid this stress, so if you do not duplicate a spell of 8th level or lower, this is what happens. So that is the base Cleric class. I would say fairly minor changes except for Divine Intervention. Divine Intervention had a major revision. Everything else is at least similar to the way it was before. And now let's look at Cleric spells. So the Cleric spell list is going to look basically identical to the way it did in 2014, plus the additional spells added from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. In addition to that, we will also have Circle of Power, which has been added to the Cleric spell list. This was previously a Paladin spell, still is, but it's now also a Cleric and Wizard spell. And Power Word Fortify, which is a brand new spell. So I'm not going to go into Power Word Fortify here. I went over it in my new spells video. Circle of Power has not changed from the 2014 version, and it is a good spell. A very nice spell for clerics to get at 5th level. Concentration spell lasts up to 10 minutes, or radiates around you in a 30-foot emanation for the duration. Well in the area, you and your allies have advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. When an affected creature makes a saving throw against a spell or magical effect that allows a save to take only half damage, it takes no damage if it succeeds on the save. This is the same as it was in the 2014 Player's Handbook, except now available to clerics. I've seen bards take this with their 10th level magical secrets. It's that good a spell. So adding it to the cleric spell list is a pretty nice boost for clerics. Now, when we're talking about iconic cleric spells, I don't know if any spell is more iconic for clerics than Cure Wounds. Cure Wounds got a major buff in the 2024 Player's Handbook. It says, a creature you touch regains a number of hit points equal to 2d8 plus your spellcasting ability modifier. That used to be 1d8, but in addition, using a higher level spell slot, the healing increases by 2d8 for each spell slot level above 1, and that is double the scaling. So what is happening with Cure Wounds is that at level 1, I would be expecting the creature that you cast it on to recover around 12 hit points. At level 1, 12 hit points is probably more than their maximum, so it can take a creature right from 0 to full hit points. Maybe not a barbarian, but pretty much anybody else. And when we upcast it, it gets to the point where when we get to like 6th level spells and you get the heal spell, Cure Wounds is doing a similar amount of healing if you were to cast it at the same level. That's how good Cure Wounds has become. Healing Word has seen similar revision. It's 2d4 plus your wisdom modifier, and then an additional 2d4 per spell level. We see a similar revision with Mass Cure Wounds and Mass Healing Word. But yeah, pretty dramatic improvements to healing spells, which are a mainstay of the cleric. There's 2 other spells I consider fairly iconic for clerics. One is Spiritual Weapon, and the huge change here is they've added concentration. So Spiritual Weapon now has concentration. The other change is it does scale better. It says the damage increases by a d8 for every slot level above 2. It used to be every other slot level above 2. So if you cast Spiritual Weapon using a 3rd level slot, it didn't change at all. And if you did a 4th level slot, you get 1 measly d8 of additional damage. And now you would get 1d8 per spell slot level. The question is Spiritual Weapon worth casting? And the answer is, I don't know. I mean, I'm not convinced the Spiritual Weapon in the 2014 version was something that was a must-have for a cleric. It was okay some of the time. It really depended on your situation. With adding concentration, once I get to 5th level and a Spirit Guardians is available, I don't know if I'd ever even consider casting Spiritual Weapon. Even if I'm 3rd level, do I want to cast Spiritual Weapon instead of something like Bless? I don't know. I mean, it is a bonus action to cast and a bonus action to control. So I suppose if I have something really cool to do with my action, maybe at level 3. But then, again, once I get to level 5, I'm concentrating on something else. I don't think I would concentrate on Spiritual Weapon anymore. Now, from a mechanics point of view, you know, as soon as I saw this in the playtest, I kind of got it. Because you control your Spiritual Weapon after you cast it. And it's kind of odd to have a spell that doesn't use concentration that you're controlling. But Jeremy Crawford came out and he said the reason they added concentration to Spiritual Weapon was because they thought it was too powerful. And that is odd to me. Spiritual Weapon did not stand out to me as a spell that was overpowered at all. But anyway, I don't know if I'd be grabbing Spiritual Weapon anymore. However, if there's a spell more iconic than Spiritual Weapon for optimizers and clerics. It's definitely Spirit Guardians, and that got a major revision. That's very nice. So Spirit Guardians, it says, protective spirits flit around you in a 15-foot emanation for the duration. If you're good or neutral, they appear angelic, and if you're evil, they appear fiendish. When you cast a spell, you can designate creatures to be unaffected by it. That is not the way it was in the old version. In the old version, you could choose spells to be unaffected by it if you could see them when you cast a spell. So, and I've had this happen a lot. Running games is, you're running on a map, and there's corners, and often the cleric will cast, and somebody's like hidden behind a corner or something. They couldn't be excluded from Spirit Guardians. Now they can, so that's a nice improvement. Any other creature's speed is halved in the emanation, and whenever the emanation enters a creature's space, and whenever a creature enters the emanation or ends its turn there, creature must make a wisdom saving throw or take the damage. Damage is the same. So the change here is the old version. If a creature started its turn in the area or moved into the area on a turn, it took the damage. So now they don't take damage at the start of their turn. They take damage at the end of their turn, but they take damage either if they enter the emanation or the emanation enters their space. And that is the huge change. At this point, I've played with these new rules once in a game, and we had a cleric. This was 6th level. We had a cleric using Spirit Guardians, and what he would do is cast Spirit Guardians, and then on his turn, what he'd do is he would run around and, clock all the enemies with Spirit Guardians, and then he would end his turn, and he would ready his action to move again. And so he would end his turn, so the emanation's not in the area of any of the enemies, and then before they got a chance to go, he'd go and do it all again, hitting them a second time with one Spirit Guardian spell. And this is just so much easier to inflict repeat damage with Spirit Guardians. We also had a case where another player just moved over, grappled the cleric, and then moved them up and hit the enemies. And when I think about, what monks can do now and what characters with the grappler feat can do now, Spirit Guardians is going to really, really be more effective than it was before. Also, conjure woodland beings for druids, similar thing. And, we figured, this tactic needs a name. The guy who used it says it should be called rugby because it's like grabbing the ball and you grab the cleric and you run around with them and hit all the enemies with it. I kind of thought it was like pinball, hitting off the bumpers, and bumpers are the enemies. But it's going to get a name because this is such a good tactic that I think it is going to be a mainstay with these new rules. So yeah, major change to Spirit Guardians. Big buff, in my opinion. And let's move on to the subclasses. We are going to begin with the life domain. So at level 3, we get Disciple of Life. When you cast a spell that you cast with a spell slot, it restores hit points to a creature. That creature regains additional hit points on the turn you cast a spell. The additional hit points equal 2 plus the spell slot's level. For most tables, this will not feel different at all. For tables that tended to use Goodberry with a life cleric in order to apply Disciple of Life bonus to every Goodberry fed to an ally, that we're going to feel the difference a lot. You see, that was an exploit you could do so that you could get Disciple of Life 10 times on the same spell. Another exploit was Aura Vitality. Once again, you could apply Disciple of Life 10 times to one spell. Now you can only apply it once per spell. So like I said, a lot of tables won't notice the difference. Tables where they were using this just with Healing Word and Cure Wounds, it's going to work exactly the same way that it always has. But for those of us who found exploits to make more out of Disciple of Life than it was probably intended to do, that exploit has been cut off. The loophole is closed. All right, then we're going to get Life Domain spells. We got Aid, Bless, Cure Wounds, and Lesser Restoration at level 3. Mass Healing Word and Revivify at level 5. Aura of Life and Death Ward at level 7. Greater Restoration and Mass Cure Wounds at level 9. These are automatically prepared spells. They do not count against your normal number of spells prepared. Domain spells has always been something clerics have had since 2014. They've always had more prepared spells than other casters. We're seeing this kind of feature now for other classes as well. So warlocks have something similar now. A lot of the sorcerer subclasses have something similar now. So it's not as special as it used to be, but it's still very good. There are some minor changes from the old list for Life Domain. One of them is that the old Life Domain Cleric got Spiritual Weapon. Now we're going to get Aid instead. And considering the changes to Spiritual Weapon, gotta say that's a buff, because we don't want Spiritual Weapon anymore, but Aid is still a great spell. And also at level 3, we get a use of our Channel Divinity called Preserve Life. As a magic action, you present your holy symbol and expend a use of your Channel Divinity to evoke healing energy that can restore a number of hit points equal to 5 times your cleric level. Choose bloodied creatures within 30 feet of yourself. Bloodied now is a term in the 2024 Player's Handbook that simply means a creature that has half or fewer its hit point maximum remaining. The old version just said creatures with half or fewer than their maximum hit points remaining, so it mechanically no change, which can include you, and you divide those hit points among them. This feature can restore a creature to no more than half its hit point maximum, so Preserve Life actually has not changed mechanically at all. I'm not a huge fan of Preserve Life. I find it really annoying that, you have to go around the table and everyone has to, divide their hit point maximum by half, see if they're below. What's the difference between their current hit points and their half their maximum hit points, and do that math, and it slows things down. I wish they had just taken that restriction away, but they didn't. Preserve Life is the same as it has always been. And our higher level features have not changed. So we have level 6 and level 17. Level 6, Blessed Healer. The healing spells you cast on others heal you as well. Immediately after you cast a spell with a spell slot that restores hit points to one or more creatures other than yourself, you gain hit points equal to 2 plus the spell slot's level. Always been a life cleric feature. And level 17, Supreme Healing. When you would normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points to a creature with a spell or a channel divinity, you don't roll those dice for the healing. Instead, use the highest number possible for each die. For example, instead of restoring 2d6 hit points to a creature with a spell, you restore 12. So no change to either of these features, though in practice, Supreme Healing got a lot better. And that's because of the changes to the spells that I already told you about. So for example, if you were a life cleric using the 2014 rules and you had a 6th level spell available, the right choice for you, if you want to restore the most number of hit points and you weren't able to cast 9th level spells yet, was the heal spell. Well, now your best choice to recover as many hit points as possible is the Cure Wounds spell, which will actually cure over 30 hit points more because of this feature than the heal spell using the same level spell slot. Of course, heal can be cast at range, and Cure Wounds is a touch spell, so you'll have to keep that in mind, but that's the kind of difference that happens when you scale these spells at twice the rate. This feature actually becomes somewhat useful now, which is great, because before, one of my main concerns about this feature was the spells I would likely cast to restore hit points once I got to 17th level were not spells that generally had dice involved, so Supreme Healing didn't necessarily come up. But now with much better scaling, definitely worthwhile to be, upcasting your Cure Wounds and getting those max hit points with them. Or Mass Cure Wounds, same thing, does really nicely with upcasting. Mass Heal is still your best healing option, but you only have one of those, and that's a 9th level spell. Okay, so the Life Domain, overall, if we just look at the mechanics, it's almost identical to the 2014 version, but there was a loophole with one of the level 3 features, which used to be a level 1 feature, that has been, closed. So life berries no longer exist. If you're aware of that term, then you know what they are, and they don't work anymore with the 2024 rules. So how did the Life Cleric do? Well, I think we also have to acknowledge that Supreme Healing got better and that healing spells in general got better. I would assume that the Life Cleric is going to be casting spells like Healing Word and Cure Wounds and Mass Cure Wounds, and those spells got a lot better and they scale a lot better. And that is going to make the Life Cleric better than it used to be. I still don't think it's an overly powerful subclass. I'd give it 3.5 out of 5. But I think it's a decent subclass, and I used to consider it more on the weaker side for clerics, partially because healing spells weren't that great, except unless you exploited Preserve Life. Don't have to do that anymore to be an effective healer. I think that's great. On to the Light Domain. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 features at level 3. The first is the Light Domain spells, so these are our domain spells. We have Burning Hands, Fairy Fire, Scorching Ray, See Invisibility, that's new. Daylight, Fireball, Arcane Eye, Wall of Fire, I think Arcane Eye is new as well, Flame Strike, and Scrying. So the Light Domain spells that you care about is Fireball, right? I imagine I got a lot of questions. Is the Light Domain still going to have Fireball? They still have Fireball. Because if you are a cleric and you want to cast Fireball, the Light Domain is the domain that you want it to be. Still going to be the domain you want to be. Now, whether Fireball is the best use of your 3rd level slot is debatable, right? Because that could also be Spirit Guardians. Though if you are already concentrating on Spirit Guardians, you could cast a Fireball. And now it's debatable whether it's worth using that 3rd level slot to cast Fireball or if you should ready your action to move around again. That's going to depend on your situation, of course. But Fireball is a lot of fun, and so it's nice that there's a Cleric subclass that can get it. And Radiance of the Dawn is a great feature that also has not really changed from the 2014 Player's Handbook. As a magic action, you present your holy symbol and expend a use of your channel divinity to emit a flash of light in a 30-foot emanation originating from yourself. Any magical darkness, such as that created by the darkness spell in that area, is dispelled. Additionally, each creature of your choice, so no friendly fire, in that area must make a Constitution saving throw taking radiant damage equal to 2d10 plus your cleric level on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. At level 3, 2d10 plus your cleric level, save for half, in a 30-foot emanation, no friendly fire, is better than any blast spell in the game that's available for that level. Once we get to level 5 and we have spells like Fireball in the game, then it really depends on your situation. But for level 3, this is fantastic. And definitely I've seen light clerics use Radiance of Dawn even at higher levels. It's not quite as impactful, but I don't think it ever becomes an obsolete feature because it does scale a little bit. All right, and also we will get Warding Flare. This has changed. When a creature that you can see within 30 feet of yourself makes an attack roll, you can take a reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll, causing light to flare before it hits or misses. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. The change is the old version only worked on attacks against you. Now you can do this on attacks against anybody as long as they're within 30 feet of you, and that used to be an upgrade that this feature got at level 6. So here is the upgrade, level 6 improved Warding Flare. You regain all expended uses of your Warding Flare when you finish a short or long rest, so you're going to get far more uses of it. In addition, whenever you use Warding Flare, you can give the target of your triggering attack a number of temporary hit points equal to 2d6 plus your Wisdom modifier. So you're handing out temporary hit points on top of imposing disadvantage, and that's good because Warding Flare uses your reaction to impose disadvantage on a single attack roll, and at level 3, that's pretty good. But as we go up in levels and creatures are getting multi-attacks and we're getting better uses for our reaction, then Warding Flare isn't always as hot anymore. But being able to add those temporary hit points on top of it helps keep it relevant at higher levels. And then at level 17, Corona of Light, as a magic action, you cause yourself to emit an aura of sunlight that lasts for 1 minute or until you dismiss it, no action required. You emit bright light in a 60-foot radius and dim light for an additional 30 feet. Your enemies in the bright light have disadvantage on saving throws against your Radiance of Dawn and any spell that deals fire or radiant damage. Spirit Guardians is an obvious answer there, so is Fireball. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier and regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. So, two changes here from the 2014 version. The first is the 2014 version didn't work for your Radiance of Dawn. It only worked for spells that dealt fire or radiant damage. The second difference is the old version had no set number of uses, so you could potentially just turn it on all the time. Now we actually have limited number of uses, Wisdom modifier, and recovered on a long rest. So the light domain is very similar to the way it was in 2014. Not a lot of major changes. I've always thought this was a pretty good subclass. I think it's worth a 4 out of 5. I still think it is worth a 4 out of 5. So of all the subclasses, for Cleric, Trickery Domain definitely got the most changes. So the Trickery Domain was, I would say, a controversial subclass in the 2020 or 2014 Player's Handbook. A lot of players considered it by far the worst Cleric subclass. I wasn't convinced of that not because I thought the features were that great, but because I thought the spells they got on their domain list were really, really good. Better than any of the other domains. So let's take a look and see what they've done with the Trickery Domain. As with the other subclasses, we're going to have 3 features at level 3. The first is Blessing of the Trickster. As a magic action, you can choose yourself or a willing creature within 30 feet of yourself to have advantage on dexterity stealth checks. This blessing lasts until you finish a long rest or until you use this feature again. Couple changes here. First change is the duration. Used to last an hour. Now lasts until you finish a long rest or use it again. And the second difference is you can choose yourself now. You always had to choose somebody else before, but now if you want your Cleric to be the sneaky one, you can use Blessing of the Trickster on yourself. I think that was a major complaint for a lot of players, so that has been addressed. So Blessing of the Trickster, I think it's always been an okay feature, and I still think it's an okay feature, but I do think it is objectively better than it used to be. But now we're going to talk about the most dramatic change of the Trickster Cleric, and that is the duplicity that they can create, the illusionary duplicate of themselves. As a bonus action, you can expend one use of your Channel Divinity. That's already different, used to be an action, to create a perfect visual illusion of yourself in an unoccupied space you can see within 30 feet of yourself. The illusion is intangible and it doesn't occupy its space. It lasts 1 minute, but it ends early if you dismiss it, no action required, or have the incapacitated condition. It used to end if you lost concentration because it used your concentration, which for a Cleric is dramatically bad. That's why we're not probably casting Spiritual Weapon anymore. It was the reason why Trickster Clerics didn't use their Invoked Duplicity. They want to use Spirit Guardians. Well, now you can use your Invoked Duplicity as well as your Spirit Guardians, even in the same round. The illusion is animated and mimics your expressions and gestures. While it persists, you gain the following benefits. Cast spells. You can cast spells as though you were in the illusion space, but you don't use your own senses. I'm getting asked this a lot about other features as well, like there's a Warlock Invocation. Is it Beast Sense? I forget what the name. That's probably not right. Sorry, I had to look it up. I forgot the name of it. Gaze of Two Minds, which allows you to cast from another location. And the question I get asked is, like, let's say you have Spirit Guardians, and you cast Spirit Guardians through the space of the creature you've done Gaze of Two Minds through, or in this case, through your Invoked Duplicity. Where do the Spirit Guardians appear? Well, if you read the text of the spell, it tells you where it appears. It appears around you. It's not about the range of the spell, so that kind of thing just isn't going to work. But if you want to cast a Radiant Bolt from your Duplicity and hit somebody who you were nowhere near, you could do that. So it could allow you to cast around corners and that kind of thing. Distract. When both you and your illusion are within 5 feet of a creature that can see the illusion, you have advantage on attack rolls against that creature, given how distracting the illusion is to the target. So this might affect a weapon attack if you were going to do that, or it might affect a spell attack, but you're probably looking at melee spell attacks. So something like Inflict Wounds, which isn't so hot in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Wasn't very good in the 2014 Player's Handbook either, but now it's worse. So I'd have to think about what kind of spells I'd be interested in casting. Maybe something like Contagion, but it's going to depend on what's available to clerics, what you can cast as well. So I don't know how good that is unless you use weapons. And then move. As a bonus action, you can move the illusion up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see that's within 120 feet of yourself. So that's a nice little use of your bonus action. 120 feet. That's a fair range that you can have it from you, though it can only move at 30 feet per turn that you do that bonus action. And going back to Distract, it just occurs to me that if I was to use a weapon for a cleric, I'd probably want to look at maybe getting something like Magic Initiate Wizard and get True Strike. I think that is a way you could potentially make a decent weapon-using cleric, and that could work reasonably well for a Trickery Cleric with Distract and Invoke Duplicity. And our domain spells. So we get Charm Person, Disguise Self, Invisibility, Pass Without Trace, Hypnotic Pattern, Non-Detection, Confusion, Dimension Door, Dominate Person, and Modify Memory. These all seem like spells that are very fitting for a Trickery Cleric. So this is the old list. We have Charm Person, Disguise Self, Mirror Image, Pass Without Trace, Blink, Dispel Magic, Dimension Door, Polymorph, Dominate Person, and Modify Memory. So the spells I want to put attention on right now are Mirror Image and Polymorph. Those spells were replaced with Invisibility and Confusion. I have no complaints about Invisibility or Confusion. They're both decent spells. But Mirror Image and Polymorph to me are standout spells. So not getting them anymore is a bit of a sore spot. But I can't complain about the thematics of these spells. And this is still a good list. There's great spells on here. Pass Without Trace is a great spell. Dimension Door is a great spell. Hypnotic Pattern is a great spell. So no complaints about this list, but there are a couple spells that aren't on it anymore that I will miss. One thing that I will not miss is the old Trickster Clerics level 6 feature that allowed them to use a Channel Divinity to become invisible for like one round, and it used their action. Now, whenever you take the bonus action to create or move the illusion of your Invoke Duplicity, you can teleport, swapping places with the illusion. This is fantastic. Now, it is a downgrade from the playtest. In the playtest, you could actually do that at 3rd level when you got the feature, if memory serves. And I remember commenting at that time on this channel that I thought maybe that was too powerful. Very, very cool, but maybe needed to be toned down a bit. Having this part of that feature moved to level 6, I think is pretty appropriate, and it's still going to be tons of fun and still be a great feature. And then level 17, Improved Duplicity. The old version lets you get 2 duplicates, still used your concentration. Now we get, you get Share Distraction. When you and your allies make attack rolls against a creature within 5 feet of the illusion, the attack rolls have advantage. So number 1, it's including your allies, and number 2, you don't have to be within 5 feet anymore. So that's a significant improvement. And the best attacks probably aren't coming from your cleric, right? The best attacks are coming from your fighters and your Valor Bards with Conjure Minor Elementals. And so Share Distraction is going to be great in terms of just providing advantage to everybody who needs it. And then Healing Illusion. When the illusion ends, you or a creature of your choice within 5 feet of it regain a number of hit points equal to your cleric level. That's fine. Overall, the level 17 feature, the thing is that, yes, it gives advantage to attack an enemy. For the most part, what I've found with these new rules is that advantage isn't that hard to come by. Weapon mastery is huge for that. And I'm not even just talking about Vex. Topple. You topple an enemy, they're prone. Lot of incentive to make melee characters in this version. They all run up and all attacks are with advantage. So I'm not sure how powerful this level 17 feature is. But I gotta say, the Trickster Cleric or Trickery Cleric looks really good to me, looks really fun to me, because Invoke Duplicity is just so much better than it used to be. I mean, removing concentration from it just to start with, is massive. And then the ability to do the teleporting is a lot of fun. I have done it in a playtest. I have seen it done. The Cleric I talked about with the Spirit Guardians was a Trickery Cleric. They would use their bonus action to pop switch positions with their duplicity so that they were out of range, so that they could run back in again. Worked very nicely with his rugby or pinball tactic. Yeah, it's great features. Trickery Cleric looks fantastic. And we're going to finish off with the War Domain. The War Domain is one of those domains that in the 2014 rules I thought was okay, but clerics don't really lend themselves all that well to weapon attacks. But let's take a look. So like all the other subclasses, 3 features at level 3. First is Guided Strike. When you or a creature within 30 feet of you misses with an attack roll, you can expend 1 use of your Channel Divinity and give that roll a +10 bonus, potentially causing it to hit. When you use this feature to benefit another creature's attack roll, you must use a reaction. So this is improved from the 2014 version. The 2014 version only applied to your own attack, and then it had an upgrade, I think at 6th level, where you could apply to somebody else's attack using your reaction. This is also an improvement from the playtest, because in the playtest, you had to use a reaction whether you were applying it to an ally's roll or your own roll, which is terrible. I don't want to use my reaction on this if I'm doing it with my own attack. So that's been removed as well. So it's okay. +10 is a huge benefit, or a huge modifier, I should say. Unless you roll a natural 1, a +10 is probably going to have you hit. So it is fairly expensive. It's using a Channel Divinity for 1 attack, but it is likely to cause a miss to hit. Okay? War Domain spells, Guiding Bolt, Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon is much better now. Does not use concentration. Shield of Faith, Spiritual Weapon. Probably won't cast that. Crusader's Mantle, Spirit Guardians. Of course, Spirit Guardians, you were going to take it anyways, but now you don't have to take it. You can take something else. Fire Shield, good spell. Freedom of Movement, Hold Monster. Steel Wind Strike is a good spell. Doesn't use concentration. And what I really wonder is, you're going to have to talk to your DM, but Steel Wind Strike basically has you teleport around. I think you're only officially ever at your starting point and your ending point. So I don't think you're necessarily moving into the space of all your targets. Otherwise, how it combines with a cleric that is using Spirit Guardians might be interesting. And War Priest. As a bonus action, you can make 1 attack with a weapon or an unarmed strike. You can just use this bonus action a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier. You regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. Very improved. So here is the old version. It says, from 1st level, your god delivers you inspiration while you are engaged in battle. When you use the attack action, you can make 1 weapon attack as a bonus action. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, minimum of once. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So now I can do it after casting a spell. That's a lot better. Also, I don't want to necessarily be concentrating on something like Spiritual Weapon. So my bonus action might actually be available. And finally, I'm regaining the uses after a short or long rest, which means I could be using this all the time. It's not a resource-free use of your bonus action like something like Polearm Master would be, but with a Wisdom score, I would imagine at level 3 you're looking at a 16 or 17 Wisdom, so +3 modifier. That's 3 per short rest. That could be every round. It depends how often you take short rests and how long your battles are. But one way or the other, it's going to be fairly regularly you're going to be able to use this. And not tying it to the attack action anymore is huge. And then, level 6, War God's Blessing. You can expend a use of your Channel Divinity to cast Shield of Faith or Spiritual Weapon rather than expending a spell slot. When you cast either spell this way, the spell doesn't require concentration. Instead, the spell lasts for 1 minute, but it ends early if you cast the spell again, have the incapacitated condition, or die. Now, the first thing I should mention is when you cast a spell using a feature like this, it is automatically cast at the lowest level, so we're not getting the advantage of Spiritual Weapons improvement, which is the number of or the amount of d8s we do with upcasting. It's just basically what we're getting is we expand our use of Channel Divinity and we get Spiritual Weapon as it used to be. That's basically it, right? You get the 2014 version of Spiritual Weapon using your Channel Divinity. Or Shield of Faith. Now, Shield of Faith not using concentration, that's something. Because Shield of Faith has always used concentration. And it's a +2 armor class. With your bonus action, no concentration, sign me up. All right, I think that's a reasonable use of your Channel Divinity. And then level 17, Avatar of Battle. You gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, full stop. Used to be from non-magical weapons. That whole language is gone now. I imagine in the case of a lot of monsters, they're just not going to have that resistance at all anymore. But for our Cleric, we can just ignore that restriction now. So that's a nice improvement to the level 17 feature. War Domain did okay. I mean, I think it's hard to make a War Domain Cleric because you really are pressured to kind of make a weapon user. I think that's kind of what we think of with a War Domain Cleric. And spells like Fire Shield tend to do better when you're in melee. So, you know, you got to figure out how you're going to make that. Once again, I'd be looking at ways to get True Strike. That way you can actually focus on your wisdom, which is what you want to focus on. So the War Domain, I think, did fairly good. A couple minor improvements here and there. I think War Domain was kind of a tough domain to play before because I think if you're going to play War Domain, you were kind of pressured into using weapons. I think you still probably thematically want to use a weapon with War Domain. If you do that, same advice that I gave with Trickery Clerics, get True Strike. Get Magic Initiate, Wizard, get True Strike, and then you can focus on your wisdom. And then you can actually use your weapon, and it's going to be a lot better. Not a lot of changes to the base class. Divine Intervention is a huge change. For the most part, I like it if Hollow didn't exist. Because Hollow exists, I think that creates one option that is dramatically superior to all the other options. And I have talked about this countless times. Regular viewers already know my opinions on these kinds of things. When you make one option better than all the other options, it becomes the only option. And that's not adding a new option. That's like removing options. And Hollow is so much better than everything else that when I use Divine Intervention, it would normally be for a Hollow spell because why wouldn't I choose the best option? And the dramatically best option. The only thing that might interfere with that is Hollow's so good that a lot of tables aren't going to want it to be used. So I would definitely speak to the rest of your table before I used Hollow with Divine Intervention because it may not be received well. So, make sure you're all on the same page. If everyone's on board, by all means, use it or try it. And then, you might decide after a session or two, this is too much. We don't want to do this anymore. And then you could stop doing it after that. Or you can self-police and choose something else, or it might be a case of your DM saying, listen, no Hollow spell. And I think if you ignore the Hollow spell, Divine Intervention, I actually like it. And as for the subclasses, I think they were reasonably well done, and they're reasonably well balanced against each other now. And I actually thought the subclasses were reasonably well balanced against each other in the 2014 Player's Handbook as well, for Cleric. So I'm glad to see that continued. In my next video, I am going to cover the Paladin. So we're going to talk about Smite. Everyone's talking about Smite, so I'm going to talk about it as well. I'm going to talk about the ways it's worse, the ways it's better, because there are ways it's better. And I hope you will join me for that. Until then, I am going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.